Hi folks, we're going to look at this topic here, UDN bump offset, which will allow us to make materials just have a little bit of extra texture to them, a little bit of third dimension. So this is the search, UDN bump offset, and the structure, the material setup we're going to look for is here in the bump offset link. Okay, so just to zoom in, this is, calm down, this is the material setup. So the new element in all of this is this bump offset chip here. As you stare for a little while, you can see that we've got a normal diffuse texture here. Then we've got a normal map, and this is going to tweak the apparent angle of each pixel depending on the color in the normal map. And both of these things are raised or lowered depending on this height map, which is a grayscale thing. And actually all that's going on, I think, is that the fourth alpha channel, you've got red, green and blue in your standard setup, the alpha channel is being used to control the height of pixels through the bump offset. Okay, so that's the setup in there. The way I've got it going is only very slightly different. The overall structure is the same, but I've got one set up already in UDK. Here's my bump offsetted material. Okay, so the difference is I've made a separate height map which is feeding into the height chip here out of the red channel. Because it's a black and white image, it doesn't matter whether it's red, green or blue that you select. But I haven't got an alpha channel in my one. Okay, so it's only taking 8 bits of colour. It's only taking 1 channel's worth of information into it anyway. Now if you make a separate height map, you can also use the same sort of information to control things like specularity, so the amount of shine, and obviously where it's dark it's not shiny, and where it's lighter it is shiny or shinier. So if I just rotate this around, you can see the specularity moving over the surface, as well as some of the effect of the height and the normal maps. Okay, so let's take the process through. I'm going to skip over some of the bits of selection and mask painting, so it will take you slightly longer to do this than the length of the video, but not much. Okay, let's stop that. Right, so over to Photoshop and I'll show you what I've got. So here's my image, which is I've squared it off 1024 already, and this is a looking down onto some cobbles set in the road, and you can see it's quite a dark infill, and the cobbles themselves are pale and quite even toned, quite flat looking, and this will certainly help in terms of the selection and making the height map. So what I'm going to do then is duplicate this to make a copy, and this is the layer that will be the diffuse texture, and it's fairly uninteresting colour wise, and if I wanted to do some enhancement of the colour, then I could do it in that layer. I'll make yet another copy which we'll do as the height map, and I'll just call it height. You could also call it bump, but that is a term potential with confusion because of the usage of bump to mean both change in height and to mean change in angle, depending on the software in focus at the time. Okay, so we need to start by selecting areas of the base image that we can use to tweak. And essentially, if you remember from the UDK, UDN material, sorry, from the web page, that we want a kind of fairly dark infill. So we're going to send that back. Darkness means send the pixels backwards. And fairly pale stones, which will bring them forwards. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just run through the selection tools and the settings. I've got my magic wand set to 20, which is just kind of fairly arbitrary. I mean, 22 would be easier to type in. So first click, and that's what you get. Now you can see from the diagonal patterns that it's made a bit of a patchy selection within the infill areas. And if I then go back to magic wand, W for wand, and start adding, oh, you need to make sure that you've got this one here, which is add to selection. Okay, so it saves you from having to sit with your hand on the... That's pretty... No, that's not pretty good. That's a bit over good. That's actually removed all the stones, so we'll undo that one. Actually, there's another step back to do. Got my history open so I can step it back until we've got the stones back. So this is some of the difficulty. Actually, we've got to be a little bit more, what's the word, not adventurous, a little bit more experimental, I suppose, in working out where's good to add into the selection without capturing the stones as well. Well, that was quite a good one. Okay, so this is one of those points where now you might want to do something like go to quick mask. Now in quick mask mode, all of the masked areas are shown in red and unmasked areas are not, which means it's easier to see what's got and what's not without the marching ants, but it's also possible to adjust the mask or the selection by using paint tools. So by brushing in these joins here in the infill area, I can get rid of some of the bits that I actually do want to be captured and sent backwards. So I want these bits to end up being darker because they're height map. Okay, and I'm just going to do a video edit and we'll come back when a lot of this paintwork is already done. I've just spent 10-15 minutes just tidying up the infill bits, and now I'm going to just show how you set about making the stones good as well. So there may be a way of inverting the quick mask, but I don't know of it, so what I do, maybe slightly long way around, but come out of quick mask, gives you back to the selection stage, and go select, inverse. Okay, then back into quick mask and we can paint out some of those cobbles. So can use quite a big brush for this as well. What I'll do for now. So again, just painting the cobbles out and the speckles. So I'm going to do another edit and come back when that's finished. Okay, so that's tidied up, and come out of quick mask mode and try to fix up the selection. Okay, at this point we want to make sure that the selection edge is gradated. So there's two effects, and both of which are good actually. One effect is we get a gradient of grey rising up, appearing as we sort of move from the infill cement area up over to the edge of the cobble and in towards the centre. So there'll be a fairly large flat pale bit in the middle of the cobblestone, but round the edges there will be a sort of gradated fringe going to a dark grey to the infill. And this will provide the sort of rounded edge that you might expect to see on a cobble, and obviously the technique can be used to achieve similar effects for other sort of circumstances. So at this point I'm going to go to the selection tools. Now, at the moment I think the cobbles are selected rather than the infill, but the way to prove that is to try a bit of painting and then undo it. So yeah, my stones are being tackled. So I'm going to go to this selection here and go to refine edge. Okay, now I've got it set up to display black and white, which gives us a really good, strong, contrasting picture of what's selected and what's not. And try adding a bit of smooth, which may have relatively little edge, a relatively little effect. It's doing something. But the killer one here is feather. Soften the selection edge. This is really what we want. Now, it seems to have very little effect, slightly blurry, until we really work up towards double figures, and then it really starts rounding off the edge in a nice way. Bit of edge shift. Now that's a little bit excessive, so I'm going to try 12. And as I look at that, that looks pretty good. Okay, so my cobbles are all masked. I've got a colour here which is, it's a shade of grey. Essentially it's B set to 90, B for brightness set to 90, and that's going to be my cobble height tone. And get hold of my paint bucket. And when I start painting, I want to make sure that anti-aliasing is on. It keeps things nice and smooth. I want to make sure that tolerance is set nice and high, 255. I think that's as high as it'll go actually. It seems to work okay. And that contiguous is off. Contiguous is the thing that means it only works in the particular single masked area. If it's off, it means I can paint equally in all cobbles, like that. Okay, now we need to invert and fill the cobblestone area with a dark colour. Now by habit I would choose a black, but I think a dark grey is going to be better. And that to me looks just what we want. Okay, I'm going to just hide the selection, hide the masking. Yeah, that's nice. And I think we're done with that mask now. Okay, so that's the height map sorted out. That's a good sort of range in grey tones. We're going to duplicate it, and we're going to do a layer for the normal map. Now the normal map is going to change the angle of pixels, so the height map and the normal map should really work in conjunction. And the way you create a normal map in Photoshop is to use some form of third-party plugin filter, and you'll find there's one on the machines you work in uni, which is the xNormal filter. The other one that I'll show you in my list here is the NVIDIA. You can search for the NVIDIA one. It's got quite a nice preview which shows you an animated light working around the orbit of the normal map effect, which is quite a nice kind of informative preview. But the xNormal is what we got installed in uni, and they're both free, by the way, and so xNormal is a little bit more versatile because you've got these other things you can do. But today we're dealing with height to normals. You can use the height to normal straight from a full color diffuse texture, but it's usually a good idea to treat some kind of height map just to regularize the height of pixels, because colors can come out all sorts of different shades of grey really, which essentially is what the normal map uses, or what the normal effect uses to generate the angle of pixel. Okay, now this setting I've got here, it's been kind of unsmoothed, so it's only 0.1 of smoothness. Full samples just appears to be the way round to do it. The different options there are for you to check out. By all means try other ones. But the most important thing is this swizzle setting here. X is plus, Y is minus, and Z is plus. Both 3ds Max and UDK use a minus Y setting, which means, actually it's the green channel, so the greener pixels in the normal map are produced by the Y effect. So essentially we're creating angle change in the Y axis through red, green and blue adjustments. Okay, so if you make a change here, for instance for the smooth setting, and you press update, let's try 0.7, and try updating. As you can see, it's a lot less vivid. Go to 0.2. You'll obviously be able to experiment with settings a bit more once you know what the kind of purpose of the normal map. Okay, so I'll go continue, and there it is. see when it actually generates, it's a lot less extreme, a lot less vivid in colour, which does kind of make you wish for a better preview than it appears to be giving you. But nonetheless, that should still work. It should still produce some effect, should round off the edges of those cobbles quite nicely. Okay, so now it's export time. Just a word of warning, you need to make sure by this point that you've got your image squared off and sized. So you've got your power of 2 pixels sorted out, because if you allow the normal map to reduce down, it will do anti-aliasing. It will effectively, try calculating some pixels to shrink down into 1, and it will come out with a colour that's not in the normal map range. So get your sizing done just before you start your height map. Okay. Height map, because it's sort of grey pixels only, it doesn't really matter. Lazily, you can actually just make a copy of the diffuse channel, the full colour image, and grayscale it to make a height map. There's nothing wrong with that, except you've got less control over the results, and that means it generally needs a very good photograph, original, to start with. Okay, so that's diffuse, height and normal done. Let's get those out on the and I'm just going to overwrite the ones I've already done. Because obviously, of course, I practice. Okay, I don't think you need to see this bit. Saving as PNG, non-interlaced, use BMP or TGA. And I'll see you in UDK for import. I've imported the diffuse and the height or bump map, as I'm referring to it, but I need to show you the particular setting for normal map import. So diffuse and height, they just use standard settings, but when you import the normal map, you need to make sure the compression is set for normal maps. So here's how it goes. Open the normal map, and where it says TC default, do that as TC normal map. Okay, then we're going to make the material. So right click it to create new material. Lost it for a moment. Here we go. And even though it thinks it knows that it's going to be a diffuse map, it's not really confident, so you have to force it. Okay, now I want to add in the height bit, height map, and the normal map, but I don't want to have to spend a lot of time on it, especially doing that. Okay, so select the ones you want, each one in turn. Back to the material editor, hold down T on the keyboard and click. T again. There's the normal map. Hitch that up. Right, so the height map here needs its bump offset. So we just type B in the material expression search box, and it's the only expression that starts with a B. Probably you can hit the B on the keyboard and realistically expect a bump offset to turn up because it's the only B one, so I'm just going to have a go with that. B, click. There you go. Anyway, so we've got the red channel of the height map feeding into the height, and then take the output from the bump offset and get that to hitch onto the UV's inputs. And actually, let's have a look. I think my computer is objecting to the fact it's recording and magnifying a 3D based software. So at the moment we've got the height map isn't controlling the normal map at all, but it's still making quite a good effect. It still looks like raised cobbles. You can see the light catching the edge there. Okay, just a little bit of a shimmy there when it added the new surface on. And you can see from that one it works quite well. In some ways this preview isn't really set up very well to, oh, there's the join line. By the way, I didn't offset this at all in Photoshop, so it's not made to join. So the preview is not very good for actually previewing things like normal effects because it doesn't move the light, the shadow. It's as if we are turning around the object rather than being able to move the object in relationship to light. Okay, and finally, what we need to do now then is shrink this down, turn it off. Oh, now, before I go, there's a couple of adjustments or settings for the bump offset that you might want to mess around with. First one, height ratio. It's effectively what range of the scale from black to white, the scale being 0 to 1, is being used by the height map. And so I guess how many unreal units are being moved by the image. But anyway, if that explanation doesn't work for you, try something a bit higher than the 0.05. Try 0.7. Yeah, and you get that interesting metallic-y effect. That's really the height map being pushed well beyond its limits. Okay, so a bit of a steady hand is needed when making adjustments. I'm going to try 0.05 should double up to 0.1, and that's much more reasonable. But even then, it's still, if you look at these parts here, you can see where it's still trying to push the height map way beyond where it is convincing. So I'm going to try 0.07, so slightly more than the original setting. Not too bad to get away with that one. And the reference plane is essentially set to 0.5. That means the pixels in an exactly middle grey, which is 127 or 128 brightness, are going to produce, they're essentially going to leave the pixels on the height of the actual surface they're mapped onto. So you can tweak this if you want them to pop out a bit more. I presume you go up to nearer towards 1, so you go 0.75, should make them pop out, and then go to 0.25, they should sort of pop inwards. 0.25. Oh, and you can see a little artifact like that popping in, so that's really not a good one to go for. So back to 0.5, which seemed to work okay. Now you can see a bit of stretching, and that's where essentially flat pixels are being used to map onto the surface area as if it was 3 dimensions. So some tempering of the effect of a normal map, of a height map, sorry, might be advisable. So you can do some of that through messing around with the height ratio, but sometimes you need to put a multiply in there and put a less than 1 figure on the multiply, which essentially is a divide, just to tone down the height map until you know what you're doing, in which case then you sort of just get it right originally in Photoshop by having a bit less contrast in the image. And it doesn't take too long just to reopen it in Photoshop and take the contrast down and then re-import it. Okay, the final thing to do would be, I guess, to whack this material onto a surface or an object. And check it out. Now, experience tells me that it works quite well with an angled light. So, rather than playtest, actually, no, it's looking quite good here, so I'm going to do play from here, and then we're done. So, although it's not intended as a wall, you can still see the pop out. So it still worked quite nicely as a sort of cobble effect. Look over the top. This is maybe slightly brightly lit environment, and to show it off at its best. Oh, before I go, actually, here's something you can try. Try taking the red output of the diffuse and joining that up to specular. Okay, thanks for watching.